Welcome back. Hello, Jonathan. It's nice to be with you again. Last time we unpicked a broad and a balanced curriculum and the importance of confidence and happiness for children. And now we're going to have a little think about, I guess, the core of the curriculum. Am I right in thinking that maths and English and science is still at the heart of a prep school curriculum?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think today more than ever before, children need to be literate and numerate, and they need to be discerning in their literacy and discerning in their numeracy. Knowing how the world around them works, that's very important too, and that's the traditional domain of science. But I'd add control technology and coding to that, because the world in which they're living is as much a digital world as it is a physical world, and nothing has taught us as adults that more than the past few weeks. And who would have thought we were doing this digitally and living our lives digitally? And we are digital immigrants within that community. That's not what we do naturally, whereas children are digital natives, and so they need that development, that passion for coding and control as much as they need their literacy, their numeracy, and their science. Absolutely.
I think that's really interesting. And this year in the prep school, we've been using the services of the sort of senior school digital coordinator. But from September, we've got a prep school digital coordinator. So we're looking forward to seeing how that works out. But then just thinking about the English and the maths, I have a bit of a sense that in the maintained sector, those are also very important. So is there much difference these days between what happens in the maintained sector and what happens in prep schools?
Yes, Jane, I think there is. And I think it's a fundamental difference. I think what happens across the country now in a brilliant way is nobody slips through the net. People are all leaving education literate and numerate in a way that didn't happen in previous generations, and children are leaving maintained sector primary schools literate and numerate. But I think there is a huge difference between functional competency, going through the motions and achieving the right answers, and yes, being able to communicate and being able to work with numbers and mathematical concepts. But there's a difference between that competency and a passion for those subjects. And that passion comes from self-belief and an enthusiasm which is sufficient for the child to make those subjects their own. It's an extra layer which I think the independent sector is very good at putting onto all children. I think it's something which is maybe a presumption that all children will develop that sense of awe, wonder, and creativity, which is a defining characteristic of best practice in independent schools today. It's children taking those subjects and truly making them their own.
That's really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I think that's higher order thinking skills. It's encouraging right from the earliest days, right from nursery, encouraging children never to be satisfied with the obvious, but to look deeper into things, to ask questions, to ask why. I tell you what, do you remember a few years ago, magic eye pictures?
Are those things where lots of dots or lines, and if you sort of squint, you can, well, some people at least can see some other sort of picture in there?
Yes, and I think that's a metaphor that I often use about primary education, because I think it's a skill that children learn, not physically to do magic eye pictures, but when you have one of those, you have to look at them in a different way. You have to literally look beyond what is obvious. Intriguingly, you have to relax. And I think that's a bit of a clue into primary education as well, that a lot of children can, in a test-driven environment, which is what you don't want, they can become too stressed, they can become too focused on an obvious answer, and that isn't what you want. What you want is the inquiring mind that's going to relax, that's going to say, if I think about this long enough, I'm going to find something interesting. And so you know you've mastered the basics, but you refuse to believe that that's all there is. You need to look deeper, and so you change your way of looking until you discover something new. Okay, a bit like what works really well with children, though only in autumn terms, Romanesco broccoli.
Jonathan, Romanesco broccoli. What does that have to do with maths and English?
Okay, so you see it in the autumn in supermarkets. It's very, very freaky stuff, but it's really good to show children. So I believe its official name, it's a brassica, so it's Romanesco broccoli, but it's often called Romanesco cauliflower because it looks more like a cauliflower, and it's a fractal. It really does look physically like a fractal when you hold it. So you show it to children. From the earliest of ages, they'll think it's a really, really pretty vegetable. They often won't believe it's a natural thing. And so actually telling them it's grown like that amazes them. And then you can introduce them possibly to fractals, or at the very least to Fibonacci, to the golden ratio, to the idea that something like this can be a pathway into children making discoveries in the world of science and maths and asking those what if questions. And that's the exact opposite of the dangers of being in a content or criteria-led curriculum, which doesn't have time to break away from the tick box mentality and a sense that you've achieved it, so you've done it. And that isn't what life's about at all. Yes, of course, children should have a sense of achievement. Yes, they need a lot of praise. Yes, they need their progress to be acknowledged. But I want them always to think there's something more to investigate, something more to explore, because they are going to be the people in the years ahead who open the locked doors for which science hasn't yet given us the key. Maybe they'll be the person that finds that key, and they'll only have that way of learning, that way of thinking, if they've got the inquiring mind being developed from the youngest of ages.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So as you said, they need to find that key for themselves rather than us providing them with it.
Absolutely. And you know, young children are really, really good at that, because young children are full of questions about the world around them because they haven't yet learnt the tyranny of the fact that a question might manifest the idea they haven't understood something, whereas actually they should see not understanding something as a good thing, because it gives them that opportunity to ask questions and to refine their knowledge and their understanding. It's that awful thing of children, and I'm sure they don't at St Swithun's, but I spend my life making sure children don't come out with sentences like, oh, I got a B, I failed. A B is not a failure. A B is brilliant, but it's a stepping stone on the pathway to an A. Now, that road might be a very, very long pathway, and we might not get there this week or even next week or even next month, but we'll get there in the end because we've got that spirit of inquiry. And it might present itself as inquiry. Some people might call it spirituality, some might call it creativity, some might call it awe and wonder, but it's absolutely vital. It's that passion within a child. And if ever a child asks those dreadful questions like, oh, do I need this for the exam? Then that school should realize there's a problem, because the exam tail does not wag the educational dog. It should be the other way round. And if learning has happened properly, and if children get the right understanding about learning, all exams, all assessments, anything like that will just fall into place. And it really, really, really will.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And Jonathan, I have a challenge for you. Perhaps when you start St Swithun's in the autumn, you might be able to grow some of those broccoli in our allotment.
I will. We could certainly have a try at that. That would be a fascinating thing to explore. Yes. Well, we could have a go. Yeah. How brilliant that would be, and maybe have slow motion photography, or we could take photographs of them every day and see them growing and developing. That would be a lovely thing to do. So you have an allotment, Jane. I don't even have a blade of grass in my current school. It's all artificial. So you've got rolling green fields and an allotment. Right.
Definitely. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.